So now let's look at some further details in section 2.3 regarding to histograms, and specifically its different shapes of data distribution. So the idea is that if you look back at the way how we construct a histogram, any histogram, and these are the bars for the histograms that we kind of had, and then we had. Now what I did was I said earlier that we put tip points here, the midpoint right on the top of each bar right there, and we kind of try to draw a line connecting through these points. Now you have to understand that our data here in a data set 1 or data set 2 or any of the data set can offer on the data sheet, the data here is considered small, very small. So you don't see much of the purpose of doing these, drawing these lines through the bars here. But imagine when your actual data gets large, when you really are dealing with some real data, real set of data out there. A lot of times your histograms contain much more bars compared to what we're having. So those connected lines through the dots will actually form some kind of smoother shape, and so the shape of that curve right there will be telling you the shape of your data distributions. So you can see that the idea of when you look at the shape here, when you look at the curve, it tells you where your data has more concentration and where your data has less concentration. So generally there are a few different shapes that quite commonly happening out there. So the first type of shape that we have, in some case, and it's quite common as well, in some case when you finish constructing your histogram, you're gonna run into some kind of thing like this. Okay, you're running yourself into histograms that has a setup that looks like this. So these are once again, imagine those are your vertical bars. Okay, and so if you're thinking about the smooth curve that going through these bars, the smooth curve is forming some kind of curve that's more heavily concentrated on the left hand side and spaced out and levels down to the far right here. So this kind of distribution, this kind of shape right here, we give it a name and we call it a skewed. It's a skewed right distribution. So here I'm not asking you to know what it is all about. I'm just saying that when you lay down your histogram and it looks like that, where data more heavily concentrated on the left side and it's levels down on the right to the right hand side, we give it a name. It's called skewed right distribution. And likewise, when your data distribution has a shape that looks like this, and once again imagine that for any data set that you might encounter, you might run into something like this. Okay, you might run into something like this. Okay, with things more heavily concentrated on the right hand side and levels away to the left hand side. So in that case, we give it a name, a skewed left distribution. Okay, so that's the name for your data distributions when your histogram run into something that has this shape right here. We have more concentration of data to the right hand side and less data concentration on the left hand side, and it looks like things level down to the left hand side. And then another shape of distribution that can also be quite common out there is when your data, and once again think of your histogram, they might lay out like this. Your histogram might have some kind of center and things equally levels away to the two side of that center. Okay, alright, and so when your shape becomes like that, where it looks more to be symmetric. And of course, when things go symmetric, there's some kind of center line right there. We call the shape a normal distribution. So when your distribution has a shape that looks kind of like a bell curve like that, we call that a normal distribution. Okay, and specifically this curve right here, we call that the bell curve. Okay, and just for your learning, for your understanding, now the center, in the case of that we have a normal distribution curve, now right at the center of the symmetry line, we actually, that value here is actually the mean value of your data, and I will be going over what it means by being the mean value later on in the later chapters here. Okay, so once again, commonly we're having these three types of shapes out there of distributions. The first shape here we have is a skewed right distributions, where the shape here is more focused to the left hand side and levels away to the right hand side. And then for the next one here, we're talking about a skewed left distribution, where data focus on the right hand side and spaced out on the left hand side. And then lastly, we have a normal distribution that has a heavy center here, and then things spaced out equally to the two hand sides. Okay, so those are the three basic shapes that we have in terms of different shapes of distribution.